So this might not be the best Western I've ever seen, but it might be the most fun. Tombstone. Now, Tombstone came out in 1993. It's a Western. It's a movie that I've always enjoyed, which even though it is a more lighthearted, romanticized take on the Old West, it is a movie that I weirdly find myself coming back to time and again. That's mostly because of the cast. This movie has a stacked cast. The lineup is insane, and they have such charisma and personality thrown into these characters and archetypes that we've seen a million times, but there's something about the depictions in Tombstone that just are a cut above everything else, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. So let's dive right in. What's Tombstone about? Well, it's a story of Wyatt Earp and his family and the shootout of the OK Corral. Again, this is not something that's never been depicted on film before. It's been depicted several times. They even made a Star Trek original series episode about it. This is a narrative that we've seen played out and mythologized time and time again. So what really does Tombstone do to make it memorable? Well, like I said in the beginning, it's the cast. You have the Earps, the three brothers that go into Tombstone trying to go into business for themselves. Wyatt Earp, played by Kurt Russell, and his two brothers, played by Bill Paxton and Sam Elliott. And these three are just fantastic. They bounce off of each other perfectly. You 100% buy that these are adult brothers, that they've been through a lot. They've had some adventures leading up to this. And even though Wyatt isn't the oldest, he's kind of the middle child, he is more or less the leader of the group. He's the one that makes all the big decisions. And Kurt Russell plays this phenomenally. I love Kurt Russell. He's one of my favorite actors that are still working today. He's got that classic cowboy John Wayne energy, but there's something in his eyes and in some of his deliveries where there's a little bit more pathos behind the persona. You see the persona of Wyatt Earp, the man that's all about law and order, just wants to settle down, make a little bit of money, have his own American dream, but there's something a little crazy that wants to kind of get into trouble a little bit, that wants a little bit more of a old school adventure, that maybe he's not past his prime, he can still do something fantastical. And Kurt Russell really brings that out to the point where you're not always sure if he's making the right decision. And I'm just going to come right out with that. I don't really know the ins and outs of the actual history regarding the Earp family and Doc Holliday and their relationship and the OK Corral, the Cowboys, all that stuff. I've kind of picked up bits and pieces over the years, so I have kind of a rough idea, but as far as the details about what this movie gets right and what it gets wrong, I can't really tell you. All I know is that the other Wyatt Earp movie that came out around the same time with Kevin Costner as Wyatt Earp, from what I've heard, is a much more accurate depiction, and that is actually the first Wyatt Earp movie that I ever saw. And it's fine, it tells the story well, but it's a bit slower, a bit less interesting, and the charisma just isn't there with that cast compared to the cast that we get here, because the Earp boys really do carry this movie. And if you can't relate to these three characters, you're just not going to get into this movie. But thankfully, Bill Paxton and Sam Elliott are great support to what Kurt Russell is really doing with this performance. He is putting in the work. He does a great job, and he would be the standout of this movie if we didn't have another amazing scene stealer in the form of Doc Holliday, played by Val Kilmer. And this may be my favorite Val Kilmer role that he's ever taken on. He's played some pretty memorable characters in the past, but when I think of Val Kilmer and his legacy and him as an actor, this is the movie that I think of first. Because he is so good in this, even though he's taking huge swings with characterization and performance. He's got a pretty silly voice that he puts on for this movie because he's this southern aristocrat from Georgia, and he's supposed to sound educated. But that's something you really need to be careful of, because if you didn't incorporate the charm and charisma, and most importantly, this quiet and reserved strength behind all of his actions that he does in this movie, it would just come off as silly. You couldn't take him the least bit seriously, and ultimately just be comic relief. He wouldn't have any weight or gravitas, which this movie definitely wants to have. Some of the quieter scenes between Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp are some of the most emotionally impactful scenes in the film, because their relationship, their camaraderie, the fact that they consider each other friends, even though they don't always agree with each other on everything, it's just so relatable and so human. And it's the heart and soul of this movie, and I'm so glad that this telling focuses on that first and foremost, even though there are a lot of other things going on here. You have the whole thing with the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are probably the best example of shorthand being used in this movie. There's a lot of things that need to be explained because it is a period piece, and the politics of the day are a little bit different, and the city of Tombstone itself is kind of a complicated situation. But what this movie does really well is they simplify. They give you all the information you need very early on, and they strip everything back, even as far as just giving the cowboy gang a signature red sash so we can tell them apart from everybody else. That's brilliant. Now, is it historically accurate? I don't know. I'm gonna go with probably not. But as far as the filmmaking is concerned, it does make the movie a lot easier to follow. You can really track, okay, who's left of the cowboy gang. Because over the course of this movie, a lot of people die, a lot of cowboys get killed, and you just see this feud between the Earps and Holiday and the cowboy gang, and it just escalates until the third act where Wyatt just becomes this angel of death going after the cowboy gang, just trying to wipe them out. But the cowboys aren't just one-dimensional villains either, like the bandits from the Magnificent Seven movies. They actually got really good actors to be the cowboys here too. Powers Booth is the cowboy leader, and that dude just has such a commanding presence on screen. If you look at his performance in Deadwood, it's basically the same thing here. He's just this figure that comes into town and you know he means business. He doesn't really have to say much, but just the looks he gives, the way he just sits in a chair, you know that this guy's in charge, and he does a great job. And he's accompanied by other people that I honestly forgot were in this movie, like Michael Biehn. He's Johnny Ringo. He's this young gun guy that keeps trying to prove himself, and he has a little bit of a feud with Holiday. They have some good back and forth throughout this movie. Some of the most memorable lines are between these two when they're bickering back and forth. They even slip into Latin at one point, and they just keep going. They just keep trying to one-up each other. It's great. It adds a bit more color to this universe. But you also have Thomas Hayden Church in here. He's great. He only has a couple of scenes, but you definitely remember them. And probably my favorite performance among the Cowboys is probably Stephen Lang as Ike Clanton. He's just such a coward and a weasel, but he talks a big game at the same time. He's just this guy that you don't really know what to do with him, and Wyatt Earp kind of lets him go for a lot of this movie, and he's just kind of toying with him. He's playing these little games, because Ike is by no means the sharpest tool in the shed. He's a bit dull and in over his head, so I think Wyatt finds it a little entertaining to just toy with him for as long as he does. And it's stuff like that where this movie isn't afraid to just have a little fun with its premise. It's not this grim, serious, historical drama throughout the whole time. It's a fun, adventurous cowboy movie. Remember those? We haven't really had one of those in a while. Probably the only other one that I can think of that has this amount of fun with its premise is the remake of The Magnificent Seven that came out in, I think it was 2017. That movie, kind of along the same lines, took the core idea and treated it with some dignity, but also had fun with the tropes of the genre. The shootouts, the horse chases, the bar fights, all those classic tropes that you want to see in a western like this were in that movie and are here in Tombstone. It's so much fun to watch, and it makes the runtime just breeze by. But that being said, there are some scenes that do bog down the story a little bit, and unfortunately they are the scenes with Dana Delaney as the love interest here. Wyatt, of course, is a happily married man, but he's also interested in this actress that comes into town, and she's played by Dana Delaney. And while she's not bad, she's interesting because she is an actor and is this other type of woman, a bit more modern, a bit more 90s for lack of a better word, because you do see a lot more modern language, modern flirting going on with her character, as opposed to the other women of the movie who feel like they're much more in that 1800s setting. Dana Delaney does stand out, and I think that was the point, so I'm okay with that, even though it does kind of distract from the setting and the time period. I just chalk that up to artistic license, but my issue is more the stuff they actually do with this romance subplot, this affair. It's just not that creative. It's just very standard 90s rom-com scenes that you've seen a million times, and the fact that it's happening in the Old West doesn't make it feel fresh and new. It just feels like the same beats, the same tropes that we've seen before. I don't really know how you would change that. Maybe play around with some of the characters' expectations. I do know that there is a deleted scene where Wyatt and his wife do talk about this affair and they have an argument about it, and that scene I feel like should have been kept in the movie. I think it does add a lot to the dynamic, because Wyatt and his wife just kind of become more estranged throughout the course of the movie, and part of that's because of his wife's substance abuse and I guess maybe sickness that's hinted at, or maybe that's just addiction. It's kind of vague. So that whole aspect of the film is a bit underdeveloped for me, and I feel like there are more creative ways that they could have gone with incorporating the time period. Maybe some of the sets and tropes could have been played into a little bit more to make it not feel as much like your typical romantic comedy writing. But thankfully those scenes and that little subplot doesn't take up the majority of the movie. Most of the movie is the Earps versus the Cowboys and Doc Holliday equipping it up with some of the best lines in the movie. He has by far the best one-liners of any of the characters here. There's a reason why His lines are still being quoted today. You go on YouTube, you can find hours of clips and reels and compilations of all the great one-liners that Doc Holliday has in this movie. He's great. He's non-stop entertaining. Whenever he's on screen, this movie jumps from being a pretty good, above-average classic Western to being the Western that I go to first when I'm in the mood for something a little old-fashioned, a little silly, but still has that classic Western feel. Tombstone is the movie for that. Still, this movie isn't perfect. And romantic subplot aside, there are still some other issues I do have with this movie, and a lot of them are just kind of small things, little technical issues, because the production of this movie was fraught with issues. There were all kinds of things that went wrong. The movie didn't have a huge budget to begin with, so they were really just trying to make things work on the fly. So there are some shots that are a little out of focus or not framed up 100% right where you'd want it to be. And the one mistake that ever since I noticed it I can't unsee is when Wyatt Earp goes out into the rain to just cry and moan. And all the rain's come down and the shot pulls back super wide where you can clearly see where the rain machine ends and the rest of the shot is just not being affected by it. That kind of stuff does pull me out of the movie a little bit, but thankfully the personalities on screen are just so infectious and likable. Even the bad guys, while you're not really rooting for them, they are still so entertaining to watch. And there's actors that I'm sure I forgot to mention that just pop up out of nowhere. You're like, oh, they're in this movie too. That's cool. They have a couple great lines, and then, you move on to the next scene, and oh my gosh, there's this actor too. And that just makes the movie so much more enjoyable to watch. Again, not the perfect Western, but it is just so much fun to watch. It's a good time. It harkens back to old school Westerns in the best ways possible, while still updating it with modern shot composition, special effects, and dialogue that for the most part is pretty fresh and interesting to listen to. So now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Tombstone? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.